Hello, happy Sunday.
Happy Sunday, one and all.
Hope you're having a great day so far. This is the Two Mats Sunday question and answer session brought to you by the subscribers of the New European. Wonderful people they are.
Terrific people.
Should we dive straight in?
Yes, leaving aside the question of whether there should be a full national inquiry into grooming gangs, do the Mats think there will be one? Jeremy in Warwick.
Well, great question. I don't think there will be. No, I don't think there should be. Just to cover that off, because I think we know enough already about the dreadful things that have happened, and we now want to see very quickly the 20 recommendations of the J report put into place in full. I keep hearing that 18 of the 20 have been accepted and all this. I don't know what the other two are. Do you?
I don't, and I don't believe that 18 have been put in place either.
No, or are going to be put in place.
Well, are going to be, maybe.
But anyway, as to whether there will be, no, I think, unfortunately, the question about whether there will be one has now been decided by Elon Musk, who's forced everybody into such sort of hard positions that they're impossible to back out of.
To that, my worry is that there is actually a little bit of a crack in the door. Which is, so we're talking about the Wednesday debate.
Yeah.
And Jess Phillips said very pointedly that nothing is off the table. And Number 10 sort of backed that up.
Yeah.
And my worry is that absolutely, to your point, at the moment, they can't give in. But I think that if this builds a head of steam beyond the sort of Musk-driven mania, and it is now so deeply in the bloodstream, I don't think we need one. But I do worry that if the pressure just continues and it becomes the sort of the first line of inquiry always by Nigel Farage and to some extent Kemi Badenoch, we will find ourselves with them having to do something.
Yeah.
I hope I'm wrong.
I think there would be a good case for an inquiry of some sort. I don't quite know what the format would be, but into cultural integration in this country in general.
Yes, I mean, here's the problem with that, and now we really are in deep waters, because Louise Casey, who's now looking into social care, she's the sort of roving reviewer, did a very good and very hard-edged report on integration in 2017.
Yeah,
and it was very even-handed, but it was also pretty clear that people weren't doing enough. I mean, local authorities and politicians at the centre, which was Conservative in those days, weren't doing enough on integration. And I remember going in to see someone who worked with Theresa May at the time, and he said, it's a fantastic report, nothing will come of it.
Yeah. Why? Because it's too difficult.
Because it's too damn hard. And because the minute, and this is where it get, we were talking about this on the Thursday podcast, is that a lot of the questions involved, the minute you talk about them, the minute you even raise them, you're called an Islamophobe or a racist.
Yeah.
And that is not the case, but it has had a chilling effect on talking about this. If you talk about integration, if you talk about what are the cultural roots of this specific phenomenon, you're going to get into waters which progressives find absolutely, they're allergic to it.
Yeah, but I think we've got to get over that allergy.
I completely agree with you. But and I think one of the reasons we have to get over that allergy is because it's terrain now completely owned by the far right.
Yeah.
And actually it needs to be explored by people of good faith with decent principles and a pluralist mindset who are willing to say this is not a characteristic of Islam or indeed people of Pakistani descent as a whole, but it is a specific phenomenon, and to deny that is idle and dangerous.
Yeah, because what you can't say is somebody's lived experience is totally to be disregarded because of your non-lived experience, but your assumptions about a broad culture.
All that stay in your lane stuff. I think, I wrote in last week's New European, I think the one's still on the newsstands, folks, about the good and bad bits of woke.
Yeah.
And one of the bad
Brilliant piece, by the way.
Thank you very much. But one of the bad bits of woke was the whole stay in your lane. The only people who can talk about a subject are the people that have lived it. Now, for example, of course I can't speak about the experience of a black gay woman. That would be ridiculous, right?
Yeah.
But I can talk about it, hopefully with her.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, this is one of the silliest ideas of the woke revolution, is that only if you are absolutely within that silo can you say anything about it.
Yeah.
And of course, that's not how a multi-ethnic, multicultural, pluralist society works at all. It's all about negotiation.
But also I'll tell you something that I remembered with a sense of shame, actually, something I said in a podcast a while ago after the Southport murders. And there was the reaction of people bricking the mosques and all of that. And I'd watched, in Southport, I'd watched lots and lots of videos on Instagram. And I remember saying something like, I can't remember exactly what I said, but I remember saying something like, these people have come in from outside of Merseyside. They're not Scousers. And then I saw a video. The reason I felt ashamed and stupid about that was I saw a video on Instagram, I think 3 or 4 days ago. And it was from the time, I don't know why it suddenly popped into my feed, but it was a Scouse girl walking down the street, having gone past a bunch of lads dressed in balaclavas on their way to cause trouble around a mosque.
Right.
And she was saying, you're not Scout. They were Scousers, but she's saying, for God's sake, what kind of dickheads are you?
Yeah.
And I thought, I'm there in the opposite way. I'm there making assumptions about groups of people. In my case, my people.
Yeah.
And wrongly applying a whole set of characteristics to them that in reality is just not the case. No. And I do think there is a habit amongst progressive liberals to think allow generalities, positive generalities, to subsume negative specifics, and to think that people who are suffering negative specific instances, whether it be what we've seen, this horrific raping of girls in Rotherham and other places, or just the sense that people are no longer in the village they grew up in, and it's been overtaken by X, Y, and Z. And we blithely disregard things because we think, oh no, there's a greater argument, there's a greater good that you ought to pay more attention to.
Yes.
And I think are fed up of hearing that.
Yes,
big time.
I mean, they're fed up of hearing it because. One of the reasons that they're fed up of hearing it is that if it was happening in the leafier parts of London, you can bet there'd be a lot more attention to it.
Damn right, yeah.
And I think that is dangerous. Yeah. And I don't often subscribe to the elite group think is the problem, but I think actually in this case it has been.
Yeah. All right. Okay. Great question, Jeremy from Warwick. The next question is from Evie, and Evie asks, would a banned X, or Twitter as we used to call it, would a banned X help shut down the tirade of lies from Musk? He has no place in British politics.
Well, thanks, Evie. Well, for me, the answer is no, because I'm not in favour of banning social networks. I looked it up, and X is currently banned in China, Russia, North Korea, Turkmenistan, Myanmar, Iran, and Pakistan. And I'm not sure I'd want to add the UK to that particular club.
It sounds like a trade organisation we're about to join.
It does.
Now that we're out of the EU.
I'm beginning to sound like, I've been sounding like it for some time, like a scratch record. I mean, regulate them. I don't believe Ofcom is up to the job. I think we need a dedicated social media regulator in this country. And sorry to say it again, folks, but apply the full force of the law where it's relevant.
Yeah.
And I don't think. I mean, first of all, banning X would be Elon Musk's
dream
Christmas.
Yeah.
Right.
It would prove everything he thought was true.
Yes, and also he'd kind of be right.
Yeah.
Because one of the lessons of what's happening in the world at the moment, and it is happening, whether we like it or not, which is that the right are on the march, is that banning them on platforms and deplatforming them and trying to get their employment taken away and all that, leaving aside the rights, it hasn't worked.
Yeah.
It hasn't worked. So you could ban X if you wanted to, but I promise you the consequences would not be what you intended.
Yeah. I mean, I think you could take an approach where you know, and I don't think this would ever happen, but if you sought to legislate around transparency around the algorithm,
yes,
so that there was some kind of oversight into the way the algorithm was bent, because as Andy Murray pointed out on our main podcast last week, you know, the fact that you wake up now to X and it is littered full of Elon Musk's own tweets tells you that somebody is personalizing the algorithm to their own purposes, and that is super dangerous. And the reason nobody knows is that the algorithm is kept like the KFC recipe.
The idea that the algorithm is sacred intellectual property, is one of the biggest problems in the entire world.
Propagated by Google search to begin with.
Of course, yeah. So I mean, I've long been massively in favour of algorithmic transparency. And by the way, to hold Elon Musk's little feet to the fire, he said when he bought what was still Twitter that he was going to just open the code.
Did he?
Yes. And I think he's released small parts of it. Right. But interestingly, he's declined to do what he said he would do.
Yeah. So, Evie, I get where you're coming from, but I don't think either of us think that banning X is the answer. We've got to fight it somehow in another way. And the next question is,
do the Mats agree that if you claim to care about Pakistani grooming gangs, Pakistani in inverted commas, but say nothing about the decades of rape and abuse in the church, I think then maybe you care more about the race of the offender than the actual victim, John Haps?
Well, I mean, John, very, very interesting question. And, I do have strong feelings about the way that the institutions of both the Catholic and the Anglican Church have behaved.
Which we have covered on the pod.
We've covered extensively and made clear. I think it's absolutely abhorrent.
We gave Justin Welby, well-deserved kicking over the John Smythe case.
But if anything, the Catholic Church has been
worse.
Much worse.
Yes.
And also, why stop at just sexual abuse? The way the Catholic Church has imposed doctrine that has had objectively negative effects on societies over the world for centuries is disgusting. But I don't think this is about race.
Either it's not about either or either.
No.
I mean, let's. I mean, John is right to raise the question, but let's look at it in a very sort of logical, calm way. There are different contexts in which this behaviour, sexual abuse behaviour, occurs, and we've seen them all recently. The BBC, the churches, Protestant and Catholic, and undoubtedly gangs of predominantly Muslims of Pakistani descent preying on predominantly white girls.
Yeah.
Now, each of those needs to be understood, the similarities deconstructed, but also the specific bit of each context.
Yes.
And the problem is that in each case, there are different cultural forces at work. I mean, you and I know the BBC well, and we know the kind of bureaucracy and the kind of wagon circling that protects talent, in inverted commas.
Yeah.
The church, it has its own stories of institutional cover-up, and in this case, there is a separate one. Now, I don't think it's ethnicity. But I do think that there is clearly a cultural issue about the treatment of women, and I'm afraid specifically young white women, by people from a certain background. And if you try and wish that away, you're really not being a good citizen, because you're just putting your head in the sand.
Yeah.
And again, this is very sensitive. It's a very sensitive area. But I increasingly think that one of the things progressives can do is jump on third rails, run towards sensitive areas, because at the moment we're a little bit squeamish. We're a little bit reticent.
Yeah.
We think, we don't want to go there because we'll upset people. Well, in the end, there are some you can't split every difference.
That's right.
Okay?
That's right.
And you also can't always not upset people. That's not the test of good policy and good sort of norms. So that's an imperfect answer to the question.
Agreed. Thank you, John, for your question. We're going to take a very quick break. We'll be back in a minute.
What can an object tell us about the conflicts that have shaped our world? Conflict of Interest is the podcast that invites celebrity guests to Imperial War Museum London for a carefully curated tour of our most revealing artefacts. Join Cerys Matthews, Phil Wang, Eddie Izzard, Jamali Maddox, Kerry Mulligan and more as they get to grips with the history of Afghanistan, the Malayan Emergency or the Vietnam War. That's Conflict of Interest from Imperial War Museums. Series 3 out now.
Hello and welcome back, folks. This is the Two Mats Q&A podcast brought to you by the subscribers of the New European. Got another question.
Who is feeding Musk his UK talking points? From Dave in MCR.
Very, very interesting question.
It is a really interesting question.
I'd love to. I don't know. I think it's probably self-propagating by now, but I wonder who started it all off. And I can't help but think that our friend Mr. Farage must have mentioned it to him, you know.
I mean, I think there are two personal elements. One is he was very, very badly, and he's a very unstable man, clearly. He was very badly thrown by his daughter Vivian for pursuing her transition and disowning him. And this led to his kind of mad woke mind virus fixation. And then I think also he realised that there was a massive opportunity for him with Trump's rise. And so implicit in all that was the policies he's now adopted. Remember, this is a guy who used to wait for 6 hours online to meet Barack Obama. I mean, he is nothing if not, mutating. I checked up because I think the point about Musk is that Dave, if I may say, Dave's question rather supposes that there's a real person sort of pouring poison in his ear, and it's a very old-fashioned sort of is there a Svengali? And maybe there is, but I think the point about Musk is that at heart he's a video gamer. Yeah. He's extremely online, to use the phrase that people use, and I think that his views are entirely sucked out of. Are taken from the virtual world. So if you look at who he follows on X, just a sample, right, you'll get a pretty clear idea of where it's at. Marjorie Taylor Greene, insane congresswoman from Georgia. Dinesh D'Souza, insane right-wing commentator. Tucker Carlson, enough said. Ben Habib, who's left Reform. It's too woke or something.
Reform was far too left-wing.
Zia Youssef, who's the chairman of Reform, still in there. Tommy Robinson, for it was he. A very influential account in American politics at the moment called Inevitable West. I don't know who's behind it, but it pumps out, MAGA points. Liz Truss, Alice Weidel of the AFD, Kemi Badenoch, Michaela Peterson. I mean, you get the picture.
Sounds like the New European shit list.
It is pretty similar. So I think the answer is his talking points are he quote tweets a lot of things. He'll see something in his feed and he'll go, good point, or yes, or 100%, or wow, or the bullseye emoji. And I think that because he obviously doesn't sleep, and he just doom scrolls all day and all night when he's not playing video games. I think that's the way to think of him. I mean, he's the world's richest basement dweller.
What's that Latin phrase about the legal term to look to see who gains? What's that phrase?
Cui bono.
Cui bono. And I do think if you applied that principle of cui bono over this Rotherham thing, then it's probably in Tommy Robinson's interests. It's probably in Nigel Farage's broader interests, although it's bitten him on the arse big time since. But, I think people, if there are people whispering in his ear, they need to be super, super careful because the results can exponentially blow up.
But I guess I think that the physical whispering is probably at a minimum.
Yeah.
The idea that conspiracies exist in places is a 20th century idea.
Yeah. Great question, Dave.
Really good question.
From Manchester. Dave in MCR, I think that's Manchester. Thank you. Never mind Musk. Isn't it more appropriate to be asking how the country will recover now that Rachel from accounts has trashed the economy? Rachel Reeves, I assume.
That'll be the first female Chancellor of the Exchequer you're referring to.
Witness the Treasury having to admit that it has stepped in, from J.M. Howarth. Hope I'm saying that right.
It's a good
What
question.
do you think? What's the biggest problem, Musk or Rachel?
Well, I don't know really, but I do know that Rachel Reeves is in trouble.
Yeah.
That much I do. The Treasury did indeed have to step in to dismiss as pure speculation, which is a denial, the idea that rising debt costs have sort of wiped out all of her fiscal headroom. And
what do you explain the difference between the Treasury and when we say the Treasury steps in?
Well, the Treasury very rarely makes statements of this kind.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what's interesting about it. Normally it shuts up because it's very powerfully aware that anything out of place can disturb the markets. So this was significant. And it's not catastrophic, but it is significant. I think she's in a massive bind at the moment because she has held out, let's say, the promise of massive spending rises in the future based on growth. And two things. One is that no one believes that. And more to the point, it hasn't convinced the markets. So investors are now buying government debt at a higher rate, which means that the debt repayments that we make will rise and rise and rise, which means that there'll be less to spend and you'll have to make more money out of tax rises. And I think this is the real massive danger lying ahead of Reeves, who's been in China, interestingly enough, is that she will have to go back on her promise not to raise more taxes. Yeah. And I think it was a silly promise to make, by the way. I mean, it's interesting that we're on the day we're recording this, the pound has hit a 14-month low against the dollar. Prices rose by 3.5% in November, which is the highest in the G7. This is going to, and the other thing I think it occurred to me today is that this is going to start impacting people's mortgages quite soon. Yeah. So you get that terrible combo of relatively high mortgages and still relatively high inflation, and that is deadly. And so I want things to work out for her, but I think that the roots of this lie, and we talked about this a lot after the election and indeed before, was just asserting that the economy is going to grow under your captaincy is not in itself an economic argument.
Well, it's every bloody CFO's nightmare, isn't it? When a chief exec says, here's our strategy for the next 3 years and we'll sell more. We are going to sell more and our costs will be less. Yeah. And it's always bollocks,
Yes, and to make the point for the 100 millionth time, I don't see how in a world in which Trump trade wars are going to be a very, very significant part of the story, let alone the things the way they are now, there will be much growth outside the single market.
No. Increasingly, I think it's almost inevitable that we rejoin the single market in some form. Maybe a limited form, I don't know, but in some way we've got to.
I think what we have to do is start talking about joining.
Yeah.
In other words, this is not a going back to 2016.
Yeah.
That was a different time. Things have moved on. It's a new government. But the needs of the moment in 2025 are such that it is insane for a power of the UK's economic might to be outside the single market on its doorstep.
The first step, I think, is to take up, even though they've dismissed it out of hand, but is to take up the tentative offers of youth movement.
100%.
I mean, there is no downside to it.
There is no downside to it. And I think that it's becoming neuralgic for Labour, this actually. They've argued themselves, they've painted themselves into a corner where even to concede something as straightforward and obviously benign as that has become just a step too far. Yeah. And I think that the point to make is always to frame it, all right, we understand everyone is scarred by Brexit. We understand that no one wants to relitigate 2016. We're not talking about buses. We're not even talking about breaking point posters. We're talking about now. What do we need now? And clearly we need growth, and clearly it's going to be very hard outside the single market.
I mean, you've got all these positives around youth migration.
Yes.
Not least also the chronic collapse of birth rate. We need more young people to look after us old fogies. But you got all the positives, and I haven't heard a negative except, we're not going back to Brexit. We're not. It's off the table.
Well, to which I say, okay, let's not go back to Brexit.
look at it from a fresh page.
But
what would suit us pragmatically today?
If you look at the board in front of you, do you think it's a good idea for the UK to be inside or outside the single market?
Yeah, 100%.
That's it.
100%.
That's all it is.
Well, look, he's told Elon Musk to go fuck himself, so maybe he'll summon up the guts to tell Farage to go fuck himself as well.
I really wish, that is the Keir Starmer I want to see.
Totally. Right. Thank you for your question, Mr. Hoeth. Probably last question. From Toby Meredith. Happy New Year. Enjoying my first copy of the New European. Your in-podcast advertising influenced my Christmas present. Fantastic to know. Do you think Labour are holding off trying to reverse Brexit so they can use it as part of the 2029 election campaign? Well, very similar to the conversation we've just been having. Do you think there's any deep cynicism here? That's conspiracy? No, I don't think so.
No, I'm sorry, Toby, because it's a perfectly reasonable question and it shows that you're a sane and rational man. But I'm afraid the answer is, on this occasion, no.
There are moves afoot from organisations you and I are both familiar with to organise with funding to try to force Labour to put a second referendum or another referendum on their 2029 manifesto. And
well, I wish them well.
I wish them well too. And I think it's a good cause. I don't know where I sit on it at the moment in terms of its failure or success, and it may be one of those things that an endeavour that gets undertaken, and even if it doesn't succeed, it has a positive impact, or the reverse may be true. I don't know, but I find it difficult to believe that right now, as we're sitting here, anybody in Labour Towers is
I'm
thinking,
absolutely satisfied, particularly with Morgan McSweeney as Starmer's chief of staff. I'm absolutely confident that there is no cunning plan.
Do you know anything? I mean, I've raised this topic before, but I am getting increasingly bewildered about how little we know about Morgan McSweeney.
I agree. I mean, it's the person who does know all about Morgan McSweeney is, of course, our friend and associate, Mr. Tom Baldwin. So maybe we should get him in to talk about him. That would be
Tom, if you're listening, and we know you are.
Come on in.
It's time.
Yes, it's like the bat. The bat sign.
The bat signal.
Bat signel.
Come on over to Gotham.
Yeah, I'm coming. Yeah.
Set the world right, mate.
Baldwin, man.
It's Baldo time.
Baldo time.
Right. Dear listeners, thank you so much.
Have
we got one more? Oh, beg your pardon. Okay.
I enjoyed your heroes, villains and clowns episode. We enjoyed doing it. Thank you. This is from Elisa in Salisbury. But is it really necessary to besmirch the reputation of Lindisfarne, one of my favourite bands, by calling Neil Oliver, this is the GB News guru, a Lindisfarne roadie? This seems very unfair on Rod Clements and the boys. Well, what do you think, Matt? I mean,
firstly, we didn't besmirch Lindisfarne.
I think that's a very important distinction.
You besmirched Lindisfarne roadies.
Yes. Well, actually, I mean, there are many. I mean, they've been going since 1968, the band. So I'm sure there are many Lindisfarne roadies. How many of them are still alive? I don't know. But, let's get the position of the podcast. They're a fine band. Yeah. Great albums like Nicely Out of Tune and the wonderfully titled Dingley Dell. Tremendous. Really? Right? Yeah. Oh, wonderful. But
they don't make albums like Dingley Dell anymore, do they?
No, they don't. I mean, Taylor Swift, I think the point, Elisa, is that you need to direct your fire, or indeed your inquiry, to Neil Oliver, the soft-spoken maniac and neckerchief sporter of GB News, who, as far as I'm aware, has no formal association with the band, but unfortunately, by his very affect.
What do you think he might say in response?
Well, I think he'd see that this was another smear from the Wokarati and those who, unable to bear the truth-telling powers of Elon Musk, have resorted to claims about my past career. I may or may not have lugged gear for Lindisfarne, the folk band of some repute, but this is scarcely the issue. Ask yourself, where was George Soros when they first made this joke? I just think that he might. I mean, look.
I just say
it's Neil Oliver's fault.
I wish I had Neil Oliver's hair. But apart from that,
oh come on!
Oh no, I do. I was very handsome with her. I'm fortunate to live in an age where you can buzz cut.
First of all, that was outrageous fishing, right?
You didn't rise to it, so I had to compliment myself.
I've said often that you look like Sean Connery. What more do you want, right?
Well, he did wear a syrup, of course.
Yeah, but I mean, I disagree with you in fact, because I think Neil Oliver's hair looks like George Best's Barnett,
but at
right?
least he's got something to work with.
Oh, come on. Yeah. He looks. I mean, the man looks.
Do you think I could get away with a wig?
No, I think that this is a very bad conversational trajectory for us to take. But I also think that I really don't think you should be jealous of Neil Oliver's hair.
No,
I mean, I can't actually think, being a sort of aficionado of his style, voice, and nonsense, I can't think of and his sort of slightly grubby jumpers.
Yeah,
I can't think of anything about him that you should be jealous of.
No, I'm not really.
Other than the men's cordon to the truth serum, I mean, with life would be a bit more boring. I would love to know if there's anyone out there who was a Lindisfarne roadie. Can they let us know?
Yeah.
Who should remind us of the email, Matt?
It's two Matts at tnepublishing.com.
If any Lindisfarne roadies, or indeed band members, even better, want to tell us whether Neil was part of that select group, we'd love to hear.
Or is it just a Matt D'Ancona grotesquely gratuitous slur on his appearance?
I find it hard to believe that would happen. That's very unusual.
Right, that is it for this week, folks. Alyssa from Salisbury, thank you so much.
Clarifies us.
Well, I hope you're clear now on our views on Lindisfarne roadies. Do send in your questions to 2mats at tnepublishing.com. Do subscribe to The New European and claim your free 70cl bottle of El Reo tequila all the way from... Arriba. Can you do that in this day and age? Well, we can now. We're being brave.
We just did.
Yeah, we did. Do claim your free bottle of Arriba
We're
tequila.
Taking it back. Tequila. It's cultural appropriation.
Yeah, we are. And go to...
As is tequila, to be fair.
Well, it is these days, isn't it? theneweuropean.co.uk/2mats. You'll find that offer there. Thank you as ever to our production team at Rethink Audio, led by Mr. Matt Hill. And we will see you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow,
for
Monday.
A long one tomorrow.
Have a good one.
Have a lovely Sunday.